Do you want to work for a fast-growing strategy consultancy? Stax is a boutique firm hiring now for multiple roles across its 3 U.S. offices and rapidly expanding London office. With top-of-the-market compensation, fast-paced projects, and the opportunity to be promoted quickly, Stax is an attractive place to start or continue your consulting career. So if you're looking for a consulting role in a rigorous environment, working side by side with senior leaders on engagements across industries and project types, Stax might be the perfect firm for you. Find open positions plus job descriptions and requirements at the link in the show notes or at stax.com/careers. That's stax.com/careers.
You're listening to Strategy Simplified. I'm Sean, a content intern with Management Consulted. If you're preparing for an MBA consulting internship or interested in pursuing one, we've got some amazing content lined up for you today. And if you'd like to delve into some of the resources I'll discuss later on, please check out the show notes. Okay, so jumping right into this, an overview really around the consulting MBA internship and what it entails. So it's designed to be 10 weeks typically in between the first and second year. But don't let that initial timeline fool you of what the consulting MBA internship actually entails beneath the surface. So it really is a much larger timeline overall that is typically an intensive process and typically can span in the range of 5 to 6 months. So really not something that you can go after, on a hunch or a whim there. It's got to have a lot of preparation and thought involved with it. So typically for first years, it's going to kick off with some initial preparation and reflection period that can typically start as early as the summer before you enter the first year, or essentially early fall as soon as you get to campus. And then the on-campus visits and networking really begin in earnest in the early to mid-September timeframe. And then at this point, you'll start to be learning about the firm and meeting some folks, and then also kicking off, your coffee chats. And I would say for any given firm, you can expect to have anywhere from in the neighborhood of 3 to 10 coffee chats. But these, aren't what the name indicates exactly. They're not really meant to be entirely superficial, but rather, deep level conversations about where you want to go in your career, how the firm fits with your goals and career alignment, projects you may be interested in working on, so on and so forth. And then ultimately the firms that are really interested in you will typically invite you to closed event dinners or happy hours, et cetera, either midway or later in the process. Kind of flipping the page into October, case prep and fit prep for interviews begins and really picks up in the following months up until the interviews that take place typically after the winter break. So those will happen in early to mid-January, and then offers are extended shortly thereafter. So key thing to remember, though, ultimately is, milestones in the process here overall. It's a long sprint, or excuse me, a long marathon as opposed to a sprint. It really is something that you can't just start, at the outset, but really got to try and put your best foot forward before you even step foot onto your MBA campus, respectively. And ultimately, networking drives interviews, and interviews drive internship offers. I think one key thing to call out here is if you do not build strong promoters of your candidacy, you may not get the opportunity to interview, even if you are a super strong caser or have, a rock star resume already in hand. So once in the internship, let's say you've landed it, it's summer's coming up, expect to be placed on a real client-facing project that has either just started or has recently begun. I would say most interns will see 2 to 3 projects over the course of their summer. So you're really kind of jumping into it at the beginning after an initial training period. It really is, trial by fire. And the intent is to have a successful summer where you, contribute to the projects, you learn more about the firm gets to learn more about you. And, the aim is to convert the internship into a full-time offer that will commence following graduation from your MBA program. So again, while it is meant to be a learning experience, I would say you're still expected to create value for the firm, the team, and ultimately the client, really from week one at the outset. So find ways to focus on adding immediate value while showing growth potential, I think, is a really key takeaway. Look for opportunities to contribute beyond the basic expectation, whether that's bringing relevant insights from your MBA coursework, taking initiative on additional analyses outside of the main project focus, and or helping teammates with their work streams as well to demonstrate some leadership and managerial potential. So kind of our next section here is, who is eligible ultimately for these internships? And really the good news around this is any incoming MBA student. So this really transcends background, undergraduate degree, your prior work experience, et cetera. Classmates that did consulting internships for my MBA program came from professional backgrounds in tech, in manufacturing, military, even teaching. So it really does span the gamut there. They're really just looking for smart, motivated, analytical individuals at the end of the day. That is these firms that are recruiting on campus. So it's reassuring, I think, hopefully for people that are coming to an MBA program looking to make, a major career switch at that point in time. I think the only group of individuals within the MBA program that would be excluded from formally recruiting through these channels for a consulting firm are ones that have a return offer or sponsorship. So moving ahead in talking through some of the skill sets that are required, to be successful in the MBA internship, I think there are some mandatory skill sets that you really have to bring, again, front to the table from day one, but also continue to develop these during the course of your internship. So diving right into these, I would say first off, probably to no surprise for folks that have already started evaluating kind of what consulting is, or what makes a good consultant, let's say, is structured problem solving and communication. This is really the foundation or bedrock of consulting in essence. So when approaching any project or analysis, having the ability to break down problems using a classic framework like MISI, so being mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive is what that acronym stands for, and being able to clearly communicate your thought process to your team. As such, this will eventually get relayed to the client and is the true crux of any consulting engagement. So being able to communicate up the ladder there, demonstrate your line of thinking, demonstrate a clear-cut approach and logical outlined thinking is really, I think, what separates a true consultant from someone that is kind of just learning the process or not super familiar with it. That is what I think stands out at the end of the day. So what does this mean in essence? Practice verbalizing your analysis concisely. Being able to synthesize complex information into clear recommendations is quite critical. And you'll have a lot of practice with this with your casing prep and whatnot, but I would say take it one step further and take it to some real live analyses, whether in, through your coursework at the MBA or perhaps during a internship before you even begin your summer consulting internship. So I think the second skill set is project and time management. A lot of folks coming into the MBA program, I would say, are already quite good or even proficient at this, but this has to be, kind of ready to go from day one. Again, this is something that is, again, underlying every consulting engagement and has to be, well maintained and ready to go to display value to the firm and ultimately the client. So what does this mean? Keeping detailed notes during meetings, maintaining organized files, and creating and adhering to clear project timelines. Consulting often involves, multiple work streams with very tight deadlines and turnarounds. So all that to say is always have a clear sense of your deliverables, timelines. And something personally that's worked for me, my time in consulting is set aside time each day to organize and plan and kind of have a course of action ready to go. And then last but certainly not least is networking. And we're talking about, something that's not superficial or transactional here, but real connections, building relationships across the organization. I think while typically delivering excellent work is and always will be kind of what you're most evaluated on at a consulting firm, consulting is fundamentally still a people business. So what does that mean? Take initiative, I would say, to schedule coffee chats with team members at different levels, ask thoughtful questions about their experiences as well as sharing yours, and really seek to understand the firm's culture and values and be able to kind of enact those as well day to day. And then finally, be proactive about finding mentors who can really guide your development and also potentially advocate for you when full-time hiring decisions are made at the conclusion of your summer MBA internship. So talking through some overview here about the competitiveness of the market and some key data points kind of aligning to these as well. I think in prior years, MBA interns stood really an excellent chance of getting a return offer. But frankly, due to industry headwinds, the rise in proficiency of AI and, trimming client budgets, especially some ongoing macroeconomic headwinds, this is really no longer the case. I think to provide some anecdotal evidence here, at a top firm, you could think along the lines of MBB. From a past summer here, there was not 100% acceptance rates of students accepting offers, rather a 40 to 60% yield. The firm was losing out on cross offers and furthermore didn't extend return offers to everyone. So when you're talking about a 40 to 60% yield, there's definitely factors at play that indicate that a firm is not able to fully dole out return offers to the entire summer class. So that's something to keep in mind here. I think firms in the past had typically had this perspective that it was okay to even lose money on a first-year MBA due to ramp-up time, the learning curve, even the industry absorption timeframe, where this was just kind of just the status quo, I would say, for quite a long time. But now firms have sort of moved on really in the opposite direction, in which they feel that they really can't stand to lose money on first-year MBAs. So in essence, what that means is newly hired full-time consultants need to start driving value from the start. And I would say even the post-MBA consultant associate needs to be twice as far along in the development process of a pre-MBA hire, again, so that the firm can justify and draw a clear commensurate connection back to your total comp post-MBA. So now that you have an understanding of what the internship entails and what it takes to be successful in this role, I'd like to share some anecdotal accounts from myself and also a couple of my classmates outlining some takeaways and experiences from the summer. So from my experience, I was at a boutique firm this past summer based out of New York, where I did not have any travel obligations. And this was actually really nice for me. I wanted to enjoy and get acclimated to New York City as my first time living there. And I think something really to weigh as well in terms of your target firm list is what level of travel are you willing and also capable of doing. I think something to have in the back of your mind as travel starts to creep back more and more ever so slowly into consulting firm expectations post-COVID. My project focus was all TMT sector, so telecom, media, and tech. And I wanted to focus as much on media as possible during this past summer. So some of my key takeaways from this experience, first one around strategic thinking and feedback. Get feedback early and often, especially within the strategic thinking space. Demonstrating strong critical thinking and ability is something that can set you apart from other interns when you're competing for these full-time roles. And also, once you start as a full-time employee, can also help to differentiate you so you're on a faster track to promotion.
Do you want to accelerate your career and stand out as a top performer? Invest in the Excel and PowerPoint for Consulting program today. In this self-paced video program, you'll learn the key analytical and presentation skills required to succeed in a consulting role. It's not how to use Excel and PowerPoint, the programs, but it teaches you the strategy behind the models and decks, how to quickly extract insights from raw data and deliver those insights to clients with clarity and authority. Set yourself up for promotion and success. Get Excel and PowerPoint for Consulting today. The link in this episode's show notes.
I would say second, networking is really paramount, as we had alluded to before. I was at a smaller firm. Networking on projects was typically framed as not being 100% necessary. However, I felt like it was in fact huge for me. I got onto client-facing projects that align with my interests and also business development work that was super interesting. And I would say hopefully even open up pathways for me once I start working at the firm full-time. And then also, I would say the third piece is speak confidently from the start, especially as a rising second-year MBA. This is perhaps one of the best ways to contribute in the first week. So to provide an example here from my experience, I joined my first project halfway through its duration, and my project lead gave me the first day and a half to read through materials and get up to speed on everything that had occurred up until that point. I proceeded that with using my second day team check-in to provide my thoughts thus far and really start asking insightful questions. And I felt like this set me up tremendously for success throughout that first project, and ultimately a really good review overall for that particular engagement, which I think was really key to kind of catalyzing success throughout the summer. So just like sounds simple there on paper, but in practice, I think was quite critical to setting me up for success over the course of the summer. Again, being able to synthesize your thoughts, but also speaking confidently and clearly from the outset is something that can't be understated. And then I would say also, for me personally, feel free to bring in things that you feel are relevant to share as well. From my personal standpoint, I feel like it was really beneficial being able to draw on my prior experiences within tech and consulting, albeit a much larger firm, but I was able to bring in some of those lived experiences to the table to help out my teams as well, which I thought was, again, another helpful piece in the process. So transitioning the conversation over to one of my classmates and their experience. So this individual was at an MBB and based out of a smaller regional office, but also similar to myself, did not have to travel. So this individual leveraged their background in healthcare, and as such, their project work was largely focused within this space. And some takeaways to share from this individual. Their first one was asking for feedback and taking a proactive approach to understanding why changes were made to deliverables was really important for their summer success and ultimately landing a return offer. It's not just enough to know that you have to change something and understanding, okay, superficial, like I need to change the slide order or change the slide construction or perhaps even a model, but why that is, and really kind of absorbing that feedback and understanding it. And then kind of in a similar vein here, the second point, acting as a sponge and trying to understand business problems and client solutions on a deep level. This could mean understanding a client's incentives or implications as well as outcomes. So again, moving beyond that superficial layer to really understanding at the core what a client is thinking and perhaps how they even want to think in the future is something that is quite critical to being successful in this, again, abbreviated 10-week internship period. And then finally, soft skill development. While you'll be working, extremely hard, really in any firm, but especially I think for some key client engagements at an MBB type firm, make an active effort to get to know other interns and full-time staff in your office, but also outside of the office, right? So you have to kind of make that active effort and initiative, and I think this is also something that can really support your case for a full-time offer. If you're thinking about drawing an analogy to the airport test, do your colleagues and senior leadership want to spend time with you if they were, if you were so happen to be stuck in an airport for a long duration? And I would say final thing that this individual had to share was feel comfortable bringing your domain expertise into the fold. Your team and client will really always appreciate it. So my other friend also had an MBB, but they did extensive travel during their internship, and this was approximately 50%, albeit most of it was regional, so they weren't really flying bi-coastal, forget international travel. It was pretty localized to the Northeast region. I think this is a key point also for anyone curious about the travel component, especially as an intern. Travel has been dialed back to what it was pre-COVID, so that most firms will give you some sort of option. And even if you do travel, it will typically be relatively localized. But again, I would say travel, if we're looking at more of a macro trend, the last 3-4 years here is starting to pick up here and probably will continue ever so slowly through the rest of the decade. So some takeaways here from this individual, impress and befriend your manager and leadership staff. And this is really an extension of networking. I think, again, as I've mentioned, while the full-time offer conversion will be driven by results and ability, you can't overlook this critical aspect. I think if you came into the ground as one of the best individual contributors as a consultant, but weren't that great at communicating the outputs and also weren't seen as a team player, you're simply just not going to get the return offer. It really is that straightforward. Second point here is don't be afraid to ask for help and do it earlier rather than later. So in these internships, asking for help is definitely not a sign of weakness. In fact, really in this fast-paced and intensive setting, it communicates confidence and strong self-awareness. Your team understands you are new to the firm, to the project as well, and are willing to help you if you have attempted to tackle something but simply cannot complete the task on your own. But again, to reinforce, definitely don't wait too long. This is probably the worst thing you can do, is just kind of sitting on a problem or analysis and, not progressing it and not asking for help at the same time. And then finally, do what you need to be prepared for, intense and long hours. Consulting really is a hard enough job as is, but if you're also traveling and working with international teams, it ramps up the commitment. So what does that mean and what can you do? Plan accordingly and over-communicate at every possible moment during the internship. That is something that is really key and cannot be overlooked. So really kind of going through all of this and summarizing, what the internship entails as well. I think the key takeaway is here ultimately to boil it down, you have to be ready to hit the ground running from day one. There's just too much competition and, you can't afford to wait around to start contributing value. Consulting firms are being more judicious about overall hiring practices. So really, in essence, the bar is being raised across the board, but not just the MBB style firms or similar, or even boutique firms, but it really is across the industry. So to be optimally prepared and give yourself, the best chance of success, focus on Excel and PowerPoint training for consulting. And Management Consulted actually offers an offering of courses within the space. And this is style of training that goes beyond just the functional uses of these two tools, but how to really use it like a consultant so that you can bring these skill sets to the table from day one. And I would say digging into this a bit further here, Excel is really helpful from having that overall understanding perspective. Typically at the MBA level, you won't be typically expected to build out entire models on your own. That's more of an analyst or pre-MBA consultant equivalent task. But having an understanding of the models and what it means to source and drive a consulting analysis, I think is really helpful. And also understanding some of the mechanics from a consulting-esque model is important. And then especially PowerPoint, you're going to be required to build and edit decks at a full-time post-MBA level, and that's really during your internship. So, you'll use these PowerPoints for building storytelling and executive level presentations and communicating these key analyses, as mentioned. And frankly, the level of insight and execution will be a notch or two higher than your typical MBA classroom presentation. So another piece of advice there in advocating for some of this coursework before you even start your internship, if you're able to kind of master that and feel comfortable with it, it's just going to set yourself up for that much success, when you actually start your internship in week one over the summer. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to check out the show notes, as mentioned, to check out more and some of our resources available. And also make sure you're subscribed to Strategy Simplified. Bye.